every count was meticulously planned out, right? For viewers watching, it's a 5-second clip that's cool and looks snazzy. But just to remind people that took, say, at least 150 hours of like.
I'm Himanshu Gupta. I'm a new dad, and now I'm obsessed with one question: is excellence born or built? I interview world-class performers to extract the decisions and habits behind their success.
Welcome back to Genius Born or Made, a show about invisible routines behind extraordinary performance. Today's guest is Megumi Field, a Paris 2024 Olympic silver medalist in team artistic swimming for Team USA. We will know more about what is artistic swimming from Megumi Field shortly. And she's currently a student at Stanford University. But for me, Megumi is someone who has mastered the discipline or the art of making hard things look incredibly beautiful. Again, we will talk about that. So welcome to the show, Megumi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the basic question that I ask every guest. So when you hear this question, genius born or made, in your case, what percentage of your genius was talent you were born with versus environment or coaching you were exposed to during the early years of your childhood?
Yeah, I think I would say 30% maybe is what I was born with. I had, the long legs and like the body of a synchronized swimmer, but synchronized swimmers are technically supposed to be very flexible. And I was just not born with that. And I think that was a huge component of being like, are you going to be able to do synchronized swimming if you can't even do your split on the ground? So I think I credit 30% of it to, having some physique and crediting that to being born with it. But the rest completely is up to discipline, the coaching, and for me, the family that supported me behind it all.
So you talked about 30% having the swimmer's body as well as long legs. But for our audience, what is synchronized swimming? Like if you were explaining that to a layperson, what is synchronized swimming?
Yeah. Synchronized swimming is sport where, for me, you combine about 8 different sports. I want to say there's ballet, gymnastics, cheerleading, a component of water polo with the egg beater, speed swimming, diving, and it's all kind of just harnessed into this one sport where you go out there, swim with 7 other girls, and throw each other into the air, go underwater and die out of breath and synchronize meticulously tiny little movements. So yeah, I think it's just a combination of a lot of different things and you make it look as effortless and beautiful as possible.
Well, I'm not an athlete. I'm more of an engineer and an academic or an entrepreneur. But what you just described sounds incredibly hard, possibly one of the hardest team sport in the world. So I want to go back to your childhood. You talked about the role of family in the rest 70%. And the first 30% is, of course, having a swimmer's body and long legs. So how did you get interested in swimming in the first place? And how old were you?
Yeah. I actually started swimming. My mom says I started swimming before I started walking. I don't know if that's true. But so, before I was even 1, I was swimming back and forth. I still had the floaties, but it was happening. And by the time I was 5, swimming back and forth got a little bit boring. It was a little monotonous. And my mom's from Japan. And she never did sports growing or, synchronized swimming or anything like that. But she grew up with having synchronized swimming being televised. And so she knew what it was familiar with it, unlike how it is in the US. So when I told her I was getting bored, she was like, well, why don't you try flipping around? And so then after that, I just fell in love and I've been flipping ever since, I guess.
Wow. So you were going back and forth at the age of 1. Do you have videos of, by any chance, your mom would have videos of that?
Yeah, there's no videos, but there's me like when I'm like 2. That's like the one photo that I always see is like I'm standing by the stairwell with like my floaties and like about to jump in. But yeah, I don't think, maybe I'll try to find videos. I haven't even really looked for them.
Any of those photos or videos would be incredibly exciting for our viewers here.
Yeah, I can give them to you. Yeah.
So if someone were to watch you train as a 5-year-old, right? And when you decided to, get into competitive synchronous swimming. I'm not sure if this is a term, but let's assume for this conversation that's the term.
Yeah.
If someone were to see you train for 2 hours, what would they be shocked by?
Yeah. I think in synchronized swimming, what you see is the overall picture, right? The audience watches a 3-minute routine and they're like, wow, that's so pretty, and moves on. But for us, it's that 3-minute routine. We train about 8 to 10 hours a day, working on maybe 10 seconds of that section for that entire period of time. There's like, if I were to break it down to 2 hours, I remember there was this one time where there was a move where you started in a split and you joined your legs, right? This movement. And my back leg was slightly bent, right? And my coach, she was like, we're not moving on until your leg is straight. So we spent 2 hours just working on this for my back leg. And at the end of the 2 hours, my leg still wasn't straight because it's like, I just couldn't straighten it. I didn't have the flexibility to like get it straight. And I think that's a huge part of it where, you can spend 8 to 10 hours sounds like a long time, but when you're in there doing this, yes, it feels like it's a long time, but there's so much more to work on and so many little details that it's honestly not enough time. So then when you come home, I remember for me, like coming home after those 2 hours, just doing that and reflecting on it and being like, if I'm going to waste valuable pool time working on something that I can like fix on land, then I better like sit here. And if I need to ask my mom for help to stretch my knees, like I'm going to ask her for help. And she was more than willing to support me in that. But I think there comes a certain point where it's like the genius born or made, where it's like you need to have the discipline that you can be born with. You can like discipline yourself into having, but it's having that to not only do the bare minimum of training with your team for 10 hours a day, because that's the bare minimum, but then coming home and doing more and then waking up before to do more. So yeah.
Your story reminds me of the story of Muhammad Ali as well. He also used to practice his signature bouncing and punching move in front of the mirror for almost like 6 or 7 hours in the gym until he perfected it. So that's great. So why did you play other sports as well as a kid?
Yeah. Well, I started swimming, obviously, and then I switched to synchronized swimming when I was pretty young, when I was 5, but I did join gymnastics and ballet on top of still speed swimming while I was doing synchro, just to like help me be as versatile as possible. But yeah.
Oh, so ballet and synchronous swimming.
Yeah.
Was it you talked about like practicing some of these movements for hours and hours and hours every day, and in the morning, and then coming back? Was there a time when you almost wanted to quit? Like, was there a time when you was practicing and you were not seeing any improvement? And what did you do then?
Yeah, I think there's not just one moment. I can count hundreds of times when I was like, I'm done. This is it. Count me out. I think for me, though, a huge part of it was my family. When I was 9, my family decided to drop everything. And I was like, I want to pursue this full time. I'm going to the Olympics. Like, that's it. And so we decided to move from Delaware to California with my 2 younger sisters and just put a hold on life so that I could fulfill this. And so for me, I think it wasn't the pressure of having my family supporting me, but more like acknowledging that these people are willing to do anything for me and taking that in, being grateful for that, and realizing that I guess I'm not just doing the sport for myself at that point. I am doing it, and I still loved it. Like, I loved it and I was doing it for me. But when it gets to those hard times, I think you have to take a step back and be like, what's the bigger picture here? And I knew that my goal, like the reason my family supported me so much was because I expressed my goal and I expressed how much I wanted it. And I put in the work every day. And I think that's where it comes in, where it's like, it wasn't necessarily a negative pressure, but it was more, they understood and acknowledged how much I wanted it. And we're giving more for that. So it's like, oh, okay, it sucks right now. I'm dying right now. I'm not improving. I don't want to go to the pool at 5 a.m. But it's like, this isn't now. Like, in 10 years, I'm going to be so grateful. So yeah.
Wow. So what I captured there is, of course, long-term goal making. That 10 years from now, you'll improve. And the second thing was also captured as ambition. Not every 10-year-old can go to the family and say like, hey, I want to compete at the Olympics level. So walk me through, like, how did that ambition, get into your mindset?
Yeah. I think for me, well, as a family, we grew up watching the Olympics, and it was like this. I mean, at that point, I had only seen like 2 Olympics, but watching like the rewinds. And I remember when I first started synchro, like I would watch the Olympic synchronized swimmers and the speed swimming and people. And I think when at a certain point, I want to say when I was like 8, I was like, if I'm going to do this, and synchro is such like a niche sport and it takes so much time to like get to a good point, that I'm like, if I'm going to do this, like I'm going all out or I'm not. I think that's how my goal came out. Cause I was like, what's the highest level? What's as high as I can go? Olympics? Yeah. Okay. um, so, so yeah, I think that's, yeah.
So if you do something, do it like at the highest level. That's great. But like, how do the family conversations look like? So at the dinner table, you talked about your mom sort of encouraging you quite a bit, but let's say between 5 to 10 years of age, how did the family conversations look like for you?
Yeah. So I had 2 younger sisters as well. They loved, or the youngest one loved swimming, and she now is also training and stuff, but they weren't whole into the synchro thing. And so I think that's where it was different, I guess, where with my parents, I would express my ambition and how much I wanted it, and they would be so willing to support it. And then with my sisters, I think it was, especially since I was the oldest, acknowledging that just because I love something doesn't mean that they have to and that they will. So I guess like shifting the conversation that I have with them to be more not so centered on that. And like I can still express my love for it, being in a way that they can understand in their own world. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You talked about 70%. Let's talk about the 70% of your genius being made. So can you talk about times? And I want to dig deeper into the role of your family and the family conversations.
Yeah.
So can you think of ways in which your parents acted a bit differently than parents of other 10-year-olds?
Yeah. I think my parents were, once again, like the support. It wasn't just the like obviously big move that we did, but I think it was in the everyday things where I was in 4 sports at once at a time. And it's like, as soon as school ended, it was like the driving back and forth. And I have 2 younger sisters who are doing insane things. And like the meal prepping where it's like, it obviously wasn't like insane, but like just making sure that I had enough food to like sustain myself for all of that. And I think something that you don't really appreciate much as a 10-year-old, I guess, but I think that was a huge part of my family. But I also think they had an understanding of, I guess, and they did a great job of pushing me to my limit, I guess. And they understood like the threshold of where it's like past the limit, but also like making sure it was in a way where they would push me. They knew how much I wanted it. So they would push me to this certain point. And then it was like, but they also knew when it was like, oh, okay, like, she's actually breaking down right now. Like, how can we help this? How can we solve this? So, yeah.
And how would they push you?
How would they push me? I think, well, for example, when I was younger, I was in a club, right? And we only practiced like 3 times a week for like 3 hours. And I was in Delaware. There's no synchro clubs there. So they would drive me to like an hour and a half to Pennsylvania just for my 6-year-old dreams of being in an Olympian, whatever that is. And so then that's only 3 days out of the, 7. And I think there was a time when I was like, I want this. But then it's like, my mom's like, yeah, but if you're only training 3 hours, like you're not going to get there. And it's like, oh, dude, yeah, okay, that's fair. So then she would drive me to the Y. And I think that like to train on my own, and she would help coach me. And I think that is another thing where it's like, you can have big dreams and, be like, yeah, I'm going to be an Olympian. But if you don't have, I guess, the initiative to do something about it and take the actions, then it's just a dream. You know what I mean? And I think my parents did a great job of making me realize that, where I spouted all this nonsense of going to the Olympics and I want to be the best of the best, but it's like, do you really have what it takes?
So how much action is enough action? So assume another 7-year-old, 8-year-old going to his or her parents talking about, I want to be an Olympian. And then
Yeah.
parents are like, heck yes, you would be an Olympian. So let's start practicing from today.
Yeah.
But how much action or practice is enough practice? Like, is it like until you break down?
No, it's not to the point of like breaking down. I think it's more the principle of going to extra a little bit, even if it's like half an hour. Or like I remember before school, if school started at 8, I would be up at 6 to stretch beforehand. I think it's not physically exerting yourself to the point of not being able to do more and hating your life and hating the sport and wanting and hating your parents. I think it's to the point of showing and physically like showing that you are willing to do more and it's not just an idea, but it doesn't have to be a lot. I think that's where there's a huge misconception, is that you want something, then it's like you have to run, like, it's like, oh, I want to be a runner. And then it's like, oh, I'm going to run 20 miles today. And it's like, you can't consistently do that. It's when you do like 10 minutes every day or half an hour every day, a little bit extra, more than what you're asked to do. And I think doing that consistently is like where results and everything shows. So yeah.
So incremental efforts compound over a period of time. That's great. So how would your mindset like work? Like how do you set goals, and how did you used to set goals as a 10-year-old, and how has that changed over a period of time?
So my initial one was, I guess, going to the Olympics. But as soon as I said it out loud, I like kind of forgot about it in a sense, where as soon as I said it out loud, and then my parents were like, okay, reality check, you got to work hard if you want to do that. And then I forgot about it. And it was more in the tangible things like, okay, I'm going to make this summer, there's national team tryouts to, make the top 10, 12 and unders for the country and get to do that. And that even was, that even is a huge thing. But I think it's like the tiny little tangible things where it's like, this meet, I'm going to, increase my points by 0.1. And it's like, that seems insignificant. But that 0.1, how am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to do 10 minutes today and 10 minutes tomorrow. And I think that's another thing where when I like, sometimes I would get too ahead of myself and make goals that were like 6 months in advance. And it's great to have like that bigger goal. And I think it's absolutely necessary. And like that in between goal, or I wouldn't say bigger, like that medium sized goal. But I think you also have to remember to make like 10 little goals that are completely tangible. And that way, they're so tangible that it's almost like you for sure will get them. Like you will be able to make them. Like, oh, today, like maybe my first goal is like, I'm going to get in the water today if I'm having a hard week. And that is completely doable. It's either you do it or you don't. And I think then getting in and accomplishing that goal and being like, check. And then it's like, you build that confidence and that positive energy, and it continues to make you want to strive to the next smaller one. And then the next thing you know, you've met the medium-sized goal. And then the next thing you know, you've met that really big goal. So I think remembering to have the big goal, the medium goal, but like also the hundreds of tangible, tiny little things. Yeah.
Would that be in your mind, or would there be like a whiteboard in your room somewhere you would like write it down?
That I would write. I went through periods of like writing it down, but sometimes writing it down like made me mad. I don't know why.
I hear you. Yeah.
Like I would get mad. So it was like a lot of it was in my head, I want to say. And I wouldn't tell anybody, I wouldn't tell I would tell the medium-sized goals to my parents, but like the little ones, like I would just, because like writing down, getting in the pool, like to me, that made me mad because it's like, you seriously have to write that down. Why can't you just do it? And so I didn't like seeing that. I just wanted to be like, okay, Megu, if you get in today, like high five, great job. So yeah.
So smaller goals, action, completion, confidence.
Yeah.
And then positive energy and feedback loop. I
Yeah.
like that loop.
Yeah.
So there must have been days where you are not able to complete those goals.
Yeah.
So then how would your day look like after you are not able to complete that goal? And what would your mindset be?
Yeah. When I was younger, like, I think it's definitely evolved. When I was younger, when I didn't complete those little goals, it was like I would break down and like completely just like I felt like even if it was just like one tiny little goal in that one day, it's like everything I've done was like a waste. Like, if you can't even do this, like, what are you even doing? And it was a lot of negative self-talk, I want to say. But I think, as trial and error, as I've gotten older and, seen how that affects the rest of my journey, I think now it's more of a like, shoot, you didn't make it, happens, sucks. Like, and I think acknowledging that, that sucks, you didn't do it. But are you going to like seriously sit here and cry about it or like get into it? So for example, like if once again, this example of like, oh, my goal today is getting in. Let's say I couldn't get in. It was extra practice. I told myself I was going to do like 1 hour, just a little bit on my own. And I stood at the edge of the pool and I'm like, nope, I'm not getting in. And I went home. And then I think I would go home, like there's the option of just sitting down and being like, shoot, like I'm done. And then there's the option of, well, I didn't get in, but now I'm going to sit here. And even if it's 10 minutes, I'm going to just work on my splits. Or even if it's 10 minutes, I'm going to do this. And I think like reevaluating and once again, creating another tinier little goal that you can accomplish. There's like 100%. So yeah.
I think that's a very interesting insight for our listeners and for me as well personally. So you have a goal, or tiny little goals, you are not able to achieve a goal, let's say one day.
Mm-hmm.
Next day, you break it down further into tiny little goals.
Yeah.
And then try and achieving them.
Yeah.
You talked about having that negative self-talk, right? Negative self-talk. How would you get out of that loop? I mean, in my case, I just sleep over it. And then in the morning, I'm fresh again. What would your act be?
Yeah. I think sleep over it is a good one. But if it's still like 10 a.m. in the morning, that's a whole day that you're wasting, So I think for me, I think there's a bunch of different ways. Like I had my family sometimes be like, snap out of it, Megu. And I wasn't the type of person to love like, oh, it's okay. You're going to be okay. You can make the goal tomorrow. Like I hated that. And I think my parents knew that. So for them, it was just like, I think it's not negative self-talk, but more like for me, the talk inside my head would go from like, you suck, like you can't do this to like, seriously, let's go. And I think just that realization of just because, you're sitting there and at a certain point, at least for me, like I got bored of just like sitting there and being like, you suck. And it's like, girl, so it's like, seriously get up. But yeah.
That's great. So of course, it also talks to the contribution your parents made, like helping you snap out of it. So talk to us about your family background. Like what do your mom and dad do?
Yeah. So neither of my parents did any athletics. Neither of their family did any athletics. So we're like the three of us are pretty athletic. So it's like the first of the whatever. My mom is physical therapist. So she does, which was great for me because I was able to come home and, get like massages and any injuries that I had like were immediately fixed. And my dad, he is like an engineer of sorts.
Wow. So you talked about in the beginning of the show, growing up, seeing a lot of Olympics on TV. Olympics happens once in 4 years, right?
Yeah.
For a couple of months or a few weeks. What would you like between 1 to 5 years of age? How would you, as a family, what would you folks see on TV?
1 to 5. I mean, we watched the Winter Olympics as well as the summer. First, I felt like with the figure skating, actually. And I loved watching figure skating on the Olympics. But I think, like, even if the Olympics only happens once every 4 years. Like Olympics is such a huge thing. It's the highest level of sports that it's constantly like, if you're looking into sports, like it's constantly there. There's constantly videos of it. And so yes, like the winter and the summer Olympics was like 1 week, and it was like we would sit on the TV eating popcorn, and it was like our little movie time. But like I still watched videos of the Olympics like every day, just through my mom's YouTube and things. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And you also talked about, I think it's a nuanced thing, but in my view, it's very important, is being able to express yourself to your family, right? I want to be an Olympian. And it's in your view, how did you get that mindset, like being able to express yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think growing up, the funny thing is, I guess we didn't like I would say we rarely expressed ourselves very freely. I think we were a family who like communicated and like supported each other, but I don't think we ever freely like talked about, we weren't the type of family to sit down at dinner and be like, how was your day? Like, what did you learn today?
How are you feeling? Huh?
Yeah, how are you feeling? And so I think honestly, it was one of those, like when I was watching like whenever I would watch the Olympics, and I don't think I explicitly ever said like, I want to go to the Olympics, but it was like, I'm like, Mama, like I want to watch this on your phone. Can I have your phone? And it's like, if I'm doing that every day, I think that tells the parent something where it's like, oh, even if she hasn't said I explicitly want to go, but I think it kind of tells the parent something. And so then when I am like, I want to take this seriously, I think they can connect the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an incredible insight, incredible story. Like your mom saw you like seeing those videos day in, day out. So what would be your advice for other parents, including me? I have a 7-month-old baby boy right now.
Congrats.
Thank you. So in your case, it's a good mix of push and pull, right? From your parents between 1 to 5 years of age. What can us parents do to get our kids get passionate about a specific sport, or let's say synchronized swimming, between 1 to 5 years of age?
I think it's not something you can force. I think when kids are young and, like 1 to 5, like you're experiencing everything. But I do think, I mean, I'm not a parent, so I really don't know if this is true, but I feel like some kids would, like after learning and experiencing, and they're continuing to experience all of that, slowly maybe they gravitate towards one thing, and maybe it's a generic thing like, oh, they love sports and running around and they love going outdoors, or, but I feel like you would be able to see, maybe it's super broad, but like a specific thing where it's like, oh, maybe like they're tapping things. Then it's like, oh, they're super into like maybe they have like a music sense, things like that, and I definitely don't think like passion is something you can force, because then you can see it and the kids get burnt out. And so I think it's realizing the broad thing that I guess a kid gravitates towards and like continuing to nourish that until the kid finds their specific thing that they love to do and their passion and their drive to go after it.
So exposing them to multiple things. One thing I, as a parent, worry too much about is, can I really give my phone to my 2-year-old? Because there's so many distractions out there, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming wasn't the case with you when you were growing up. Or wasn't the case with me when I was growing up.
Well, yeah. We didn't have phones like readily available, 1 to 5. And I think now it's a generation where it's very different because everybody has phones. But like, at least for us when it was growing up, it was like the fact that I was asking my mom to like go on the computer and search YouTube to like, it wasn't like, oh, Mama, like I'm going to go, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't just something that I always had. It was something that I had to ask for, I guess, because otherwise there was no phone time. But then again, like that was a different generation. I feel like now it's like very different where there's digits everywhere, digital stuff everywhere. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want our kids to be swiping on the phone, right? While hoping that they get excited about some sport.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Wait, but that's where it's like, I don't think it's like watching. I think it's like, you'll see it in their day to day. Like if they're like kicking around their toys, it's like, oh, maybe they, things like that, where it's like, they don't have to, yeah. But I'm also not a parent, so I also wouldn't know exactly.
Yeah.
But
So let's move to the rest 70% of your genius and talk about a teenage Megumi, right? And one thing I do know about competing at the Olympics level is it's not just about being excellent. It's about being top, 5 or top 6 and top 10 in the world.
yeah.
So in your case, what are those 2 or 3 things, which allowed you to compete in the top 10, among top 10 in the world?
I think it's number one, self-discipline, I think is the biggest thing more than anything. Well, I would say first is passion for what you're doing. And then the self-discipline supports that passion. Because if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to work for what you're doing. So I would say passion and then the self-discipline.
So is there a skill, let's say if we talk about synchronized swimming, that you developed that allowed you to become the top 10, like allowed you to differentiate from, even the excellent synchronized swimmers out there?
Yeah, I think synchronized swimming, there's so many like moves you can do. Every day you're like creating some different move. And I think when you're first entering the sport, a lot of times kids go directly, like as soon as they master kind of one skill, they go directly to like the cool, interesting stuff. And that makes the sport fun, especially if you're starting it. But I think when I started to get serious about it, I stopped doing all the cool, interesting, fun stuff. And it was like just holding this position for like 2 hours and then just doing this for another 2 hours. And I think it's going back to the basics of, the foundation of the sport. And once you have that, and then you can use that to, create whatever you want. And so I think having the foundation really carried me through.
I see. So you had those boring routines of perfecting the foundational elements of synchronized swimming, but it's also a team sport. So walk us through your mindset shift, right? From being an excellent individual swimmer, synchronized swimmer, to a team swimmer. Like, what does it take?
Yeah. For me, like being in the team is my favorite part of the sport. People ask me like, oh, what do you like about the sport? Being with the team is the best part. But I think having a team, being a team player is like trust, right? And then get trust with consistency. Like without consistency, no one trusts you. And so I think just when you go into team situations, being a consistent person who not only like works hard, whatever, in the pool and like at competition shows up and does their job, but also in the everyday when you're training, like consistently makes the team like more happy or like lightens the mood or things like that, where it's like you're consistently a person who is this, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, but it's like you're consistently this, then people know that that's what you're like, and then they can trust that that's who Megu is, like that's who she's going to be, and I trust that she'll be like that no matter if we're training at a community pool or if we're at the Olympics. Megu's going to be that. So yeah.
So what is that consistent thing for you? Like, I mean, how does Team USA think of you, or think of Megumi as a team person?
I've been told that I think, I think for me, like I try to like lighten the mood at practice when we're dying. And I don't, so I think that's probably what it would be. Lighten the mood. I think also like the work hard element shines through a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we undervalue the importance of, you said, lightening the mood in the team. Yeah. And it's an incredibly hard sport. You're competing at the highest level, but it's also fun.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
But you've been, of course, you've been an amazing top level swimmer, individual swimmer. That going from there to contributing to the team, what kind of mindset shift does it require? Like, and did you see any challenges in doing that when you first start competing at a team level?
For me, I loved people and I loved interacting with people. So growing up, I think it was, so whenever I think of like the moments when I wanted to quit, I would say it was before I even got to like the Olympic team. And it was the moments when I was by myself, because the reason I did the sport was because I loved doing it with others. And so being able to go to the Olympics and then having that and being able to facilitate that part of why I love the sport for me was more natural, I would say. But yeah, I think also there comes an element where when you are working by yourself and then now you're working as a team to elevate everybody to the top and not just yourself, there's a component of everybody says this, but like putting others before you, where I remember sometimes as a team, we would train 10 hours. Everybody was dead. We want to go home. And somebody might be struggling on this one thing. And we spent 4 hours on it because one girl couldn't do it. And then it's like, everybody wants to go home and I'm done. My obligations are done. But I think putting that person's needs, and if they ask for help, where it's like, oh, can you guys help me? And I think putting their needs before you wanting to go home and relax or things like that. So I think that's a huge component. Yeah.
Team needs before individual needs. That's an incredible learning. We will show that to our viewers when the show is broadcasted. Is that moonwalking performance, right, on Michael Jackson's song?
Oh yeah.
So we'll show that to the audience. But so, what is the hardest thing about, or the most invisible thing about that performance that people don't realize?
I think, especially in that moonwalk, that was, let's see, it's the moonwalk, but I think every count was meticulously planned out, right? And so I think for viewers watching, it's a 5-second clip that's cool and looks snazzy. But just to remind people that took, say, at least 150 hours of
wow.
And I remember my coach would send us videos after practice and she would stop on every count, so like 5. And then she would screenshot it and put like a green mark next to the people who were doing it correctly. And then write like, this person needs to like turn their knee in. This person has their toe on their ankle when it should be on their the middle of their ankle, So yeah.
Wow. Just to remind the viewers out there, 150 hours of training and practice. So let's say 5 hours or 4 hours on that move. I'm sure you would be practicing other moves as well for Olympics.
150 hours on just that move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. But of course, it became viral. So what did that change for you once the clip became viral? Like, did it change your identity or like how you view sports?
I don't think it changed my identity at all. I think what it did do was, the US hasn't gone to the Olympics for synchronized swimming since 2008 for the team event, at least. And I think the popularity has been, diminishing. And I think not only qualifying for the Olympics, but then getting the silver medal and then having that viral clip, I think, to the young girls who are learning how to swim or do ballet and seeing that, it just increases the popularity of the sport. And I think that's what made the 8 of us, or all of us training, so happy to be able to contribute to that. So yeah.
That makes sense. And as someone who is not an athlete, but I'm always curious about performing at the highest level and performing under pressure, right? And competing at Olympics is like insane amount of pressure. I don't know how to quantify it.
Yeah.
One thing we've not talked about in the rest 70% of your genius is performing under high pressure. Can you talk to us more about like, how did you end up developing that skill set?
Yeah. I think I'll speak on it from a team perspective, because if one of us fails, then all of us fail. And the year before the Olympics, we had 2 qualifying opportunities to go to the Olympics. And on the first one, we lost it by 0.06 points out of like a 300 point, routine, which was devastating, obviously. But I think after that, it was like a reflection of because before that we had been competing great. We had been getting, silver medals at world championships. And then all of a sudden at this, we failed. And I think it was we had to go back and reflect on why it is that when it came to we were already competing high pressure, but when it came to the highest of pressure, why we failed. And what we did after that and worked on, and we took it all the way to the Olympics, which is why I think we did so great, was bringing it back to reality almost. We called it our bubble, where we would, because you're warming up at the Olympics and you see like China's really good. China got gold, for example. And you see across China and they're like throwing girls into the air, doing moves that are super synchronized, super difficult. And I think it's easy to feel inferior or, like be like, shoot, like they worked really hard. They look really good. And you have what you look like, but you don't really, you know what I mean? You don't see yourself. You see your view of yourself, I guess. And so I think what we did was we called it our bubble, where when we got to the Olympics, we would, or any competition really, we just, whenever we needed a reminder, someone would be like, bubble. And we stopped looking, literally just stopped looking at our competition because it didn't matter, We either trained as much as we did as much as we could have. And if it was enough, it was enough. If it wasn't enough, it just wasn't. But we did as much as we could. And to then worry about other people and other factors that we hadn't been practicing with, it's just gonna ruin us, I guess, and finish our performance. So just focusing on yourself, trusting the process that you went through, trusting the training, and then just doing that. And if after you did it, it wasn't enough and you didn't accomplish your goal, then you go back and it's like, we didn't do it. Then we got to do more in the everyday practice. But once you're at high stakes competition, I think instead of, being overwhelmed with the pressure and, it's the Olympics and there's this TV company, it's like, wait, all of that is great. But it's like, we did all of that training just to be here. And it's like, are you really, for us, I remember we would always be like, are we really going to let, having a TV in our face or having 100, thousands of people watching us ruin all of that? We have 3 minutes. You either do it or you don't.
No, that makes, I like the concept of bubble.
Yeah.
Did you see China's performance before your performance or?
Before? No, we didn't watch at all. So I only watched it after it. Yeah.
Yeah, so trust the process, and of course, and not be worried about the outcome. That's awesome. I like my producer is signaling that we are approaching the end of time for the show. I wish I could continue to talk more about the Stanford journey and so on and so forth. But last 2 questions about you touched briefly on motivating 5-year-old girls and how the sport is losing performance. So if a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old kids approach you for making making you their mentors, how would you pick who could be trained and coached for synchronized swimming?
I think their love for it. I think if there is no genuine passion and love and excitement, I think especially when they're so young, they get so excited when they love something. Yeah, I think if you don't have that, then yeah.
Okay, so let's say love and excitement for something, and I can see for 5 or 6 years olds, the love and excitement shows. They cannot fake that, right? And it has to be, and it shows. It's very genuine. So what would you ask them to do in the first 3 or 4 weeks of you coaching them? What is their playbook for the first 1 month?
I think, what's the big goal? And then it's having that, writing it down, whatever, conceptualizing it, whatever it is. But then being like, okay, that's great. We're going to do little steps because it's going to take a lot of hard things to get there. Making those little goals and those medium goals. But I think then also telling them, I remember whenever I work with little girls and coach them, just I would be in the pool with them, working with them, and then being like, okay, you need to work on, your knee extension. I think you have the potential to be to make it really pretty and nice. But I want you to promise that when you go home and you watch TV, right, you're going to just stretch your knee, just stretch it. You can still watch TV, or there's, for synchronized swimming, you have to point your toes. So it's when you're watching TV, or I always tell them when you're watching TV, eating dinner, studying, going to the bathroom, just instead of being flat-footed, on your toes, and it doesn't hurt because you're, but I think those, and just making it a habit to work when you're not working. So that way you're still improving without feeling like you're forced to do something you don't want to do, I guess. So, yeah.
And would that advice change for parents of kids who don't have much access to great coaches or who don't have access to you or great swimming pools or gymnasiums? Like, what would your advice to them?
Wait, I think it's because growing up, I didn't have access to anything. You know, I was the only synchronized swimmer in Delaware. My parents, we weren't financially well off. And so I think what my mom instilled in me was the doing the little things when you're not doing. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, you're watching TV, like multitask, like do something. And you can't study when you're multitasking. So it's like, oh, you want to do synchro, take it to the next level. Like, okay, then stretch your toes, stretch your splits. Or like sometimes I would hold planks where it's like, and then the time goes by faster and you forget that you're doing something. So yeah, I think like, even if you don't have access to anything, you have access to your own body and what you do with it. Multitask and use your time wisely, I guess. Yeah.
And last question, like, of course, about you. What's your next goal like? And how are you, we talked about continuously improving and setting up micro goals. What is that one thing you're trying to achieve before the next Olympics?
Well, this year for collegiates, we have, our collegiate season. And so I think, and we have a competition in about 2 weeks. So I know obviously medium-sized goal is winning the whole championship or whatever. But in 2 weeks, we have a competition, and that's not a super small goal, but 2 weeks we got to lock in. Yeah.
Well, good luck, and I'm also rooting for Stanford.
Thank you.
Pay the tree, as we call it, Megumi.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Megumi, for being on the show. I'm sure millions of girls and kids around the world find it very inspiring. And thanks a lot.